Welcome to the history section.
Today, our focus is on the Norse voyages to the Western Hemisphere, and we're grounding this discussion in a key piece of historical evidence.
That would be the Saga of Erik the Red. It's really the foundational document in Professor Raffin's collection, the Antiquitates American.
It is. And before we get into the narrative, it's crucial to establish its credibility. The manuscript we're drawing from is a part of the Codex Flatiensis.
The Flatobogen.
Exactly. And through linguistic analysis, the specific style and structure of the Norse language used, we can confidently date its composition to the 12th century.
Okay, so the events themselves are happening around 8985, maybe 81,000. But the document is written down almost 200 years later.
Right.
How much confidence can we really place in that, given it's likely based on oral traditions that could have changed over time?
That's the critical question for much of medieval history. And while the Codex is from the 12th century, the tradition it's recording is demonstrably older.
How so?
The level of detail, the geographical data, the nautical information, the kinship records, it all suggests it was drawn from very stable, very reliable sources, possibly even earlier written accounts that are now lost.
And the original purpose wasn't even about geography, was it?
Not primarily, no. The document's initial goal was, you could say, genealogical. It was meant to catalog the deeds and the lineage of Erik the Red and his sons.
Family history.
A family history. And that focus on, a family's legacy often brings a higher degree of factual rigor to the details surrounding it. It's not just a myth, it's an account of an ancestor's accomplishments.
So the narrative follows Erik and his sons, Leif and Thorvald, but it also branches out.
It does. It includes shorter accounts of later voyages, most notably the ventures of Thorfinn Karlsefni. His story is a whole other saga, a much more detailed one, but the geographical data in Erik's saga provides the essential backbone for it.
Which points to a consistent record.
A very consistent record. And the research confirms this through the kind of comparative geographical analysis that Professor Raffin really pioneered.
All right, so let's start with the man himself, Erik the Red. His entire journey west seems to be driven by, a pattern of violence and exile.
His background is certainly turbulent. He's the son of Thorvald, and they first move from Jader in Norway over to Iceland.
Why?
Because of a murder Thorvald was involved in, so they're already starting a new life under a cloud. Erik settles in Iceland, he marries, but he very quickly gets caught up in his own violent disputes.
Right, the saga mentions the murders of two men, Egil Soers and Raffin the duelist.
Yes, and that forces him to relocate. But the final straw, the conflict that gets him exiled from Iceland entirely, seems almost trivial on the surface. It's a fight over some lent seat posts.
It sounds absurd. A fight over borrowed furniture leads to the discovery of a continent.
It does, but it highlights just how volatile Norse social codes could be. These weren't just pieces of wood. The seat posts, the unvedisjalur, were these large carved pillars that marked the seat of honor in a longhouse.
Highly symbolic, then.
Extremely. A dispute over them was really a proxy for a challenge to one's social status, to their honor. So when Erik demands his posts back from his neighbor, Thorgest, it escalates. Fast.
Into violent skirmishes.
Exactly. And that leads to a legal judgment from the local assembly, the thing.
The Thor's nesting.
That's the one. And given his history of violence, they declared him outlawed, an outlaw.
Which was more than just a punishment.
Oh, it was a sentence of complete social and legal death. He was stripped of all protections. Anyone could kill him without consequence. He had to leave Iceland or he would be hunted down. That judgment is what directly forces the next great chapter of Norse exploration.
So, facing total exile, he prepares his ship in a little inlet, Erik's Creek, and he announces he has a destination in mind. It's not just a random voyage into the unknown.
No, he's acting on a rumor, essentially. He announces he's going to seek the land that was sighted years before by a man named Gunnbjorn Ulf Krigesson.
Gunnbjorn had been blown off course.
Driven far west by a storm, yes. And he'd seen some rocks, some small islands, which became known as the Rocks of Gunnbjorn. For Erik, this was a known point of reference, a target in an otherwise empty ocean.
He sets sail from the Snæfellsjökull Peninsula, and the saga is very precise about his journey.
It is. The first land he sights he names Midjökull, which we now identify as Berserker, but that's just a landmark. Erik was looking for habitable land.
So he turned south.
Immediately turned south, sailing along the coast, looking for fjords, for sheltered valleys, for anywhere people could actually live.
He spends that first winter, 982, at a place called Erikson, and then establishes his main home at Eriksfjord.
At a spot called Brattahlid. And he spends the next summer exploring the western regions, naming places as he goes, systematically mapping the territory.
It takes him 3 years of this reconnaissance before he even goes back to Iceland.
3 full years. Only then does he return, ready to recruit settlers for his new colony.
And this is where he pulls off what could be called a masterful piece of early public relations.
You could absolutely call it that. He deliberately chooses the name for this new land. He calls it Greenland.
Why Greenland?
His reasoning, which is recorded right there in the saga, was entirely calculated. He said, people will be attracted thither if the land has a good name.
It's pure marketing.
It's brilliant marketing. He's trying to convince people to leave established farms in Iceland for a harsh, dangerous frontier. The appealing name was a strategic choice to contrast with the reality of, all that ice.
He only stays in Iceland for 1 winter before leading the main colonization effort.
Yes, and that voyage itself was immensely difficult. History tells us that 35 ships set out from Iceland.
35, that's a huge undertaking.
It is, but the journey across the Denmark Strait was devastating. Of those 35 ships, only 14 actually arrived in Greenland.
What happened to the others?
The rest were either driven back by storms or were lost at sea completely. It's a stark reminder of just how dangerous this kind of open sea navigation was in the 10th century.
And the saga gives us a way to date this event with incredible precision.
It does. This is the real strength of the document. The text states that the settlement of Greenland happened 15 years before Christianity was legally adopted in Iceland.
And we know that date.
We know that date exactly. The Icelandic Assembly, the all thing, accepted Christianity in the year 1000. So you just count back 15 years.
Which puts the colonization of Greenland squarely in AD 985.
Precisely. A firm date that becomes the anchor for everything that follows.
Once they're settled, Erik, as the leader, takes the best land at Brattahlid.
Of course. And he's joined by many others who establish what become the eastern and western settlements. You have key figures like Herjulf, who settles Herjulfsfjord, then Ketil and Ketilsfjord, Raff in Raffensfjord. It shows a rapid, if very fragile, colonization effort.
Let's talk about Erik's family for a moment. He has 3 sons, Leif, Thorvald, and Thorstein, and a daughter, Freydis.
Yes, and Freydis is an interesting character. She marries a wealthy man named Thorvald, but the saga paints her as quite haughty and ambitious, in contrast to her husband, who is described as narrow-minded.
So she married for money and status.
It certainly implies that, and it's critical to remember the cultural context here. At this point, in 985, almost all of these settlers, including Erik the Red himself, were staunchly heathen. They were pagans.
And that pagan framework is the backdrop for the first accidental discovery of the North American mainland.
Exactly. Which brings us to Bjarni Herjulfson.
The son of Herjulf, the settler we just mentioned.
The very same. Bjarni was a successful traveler in his own right, a merchant who split his time between Iceland and voyaging abroad.
And he arrives back in Iceland in the summer of 985, the exact summer his father has just left for Greenland.
He comes home to an empty house. And his reaction is, well, incredibly impulsive. Instead of waiting or even just unloading the cargo from his ship, he decides to follow his father immediately.
Which was a huge risk.
A monumental risk. The saga makes a point of saying that none of his crew members had ever sailed the Greenland Ocean before. Bjarni himself even admits the voyage would appear imprudent.
And that imprudence has immediate navigational consequences.
It does. After 3 days, they lose sight of land, and then the fair wind dies. They're hit with northerly winds and a thick, persistent fog that lasts for many days.
They're completely lost.
Utterly lost. When the weather finally breaks, they can see the sun again, but they have no idea where they are. After sailing for another day, they sight land.
But Bjarni knows it's not Greenland.
He knows it instantly. This first land is low, it has no mountains, it's covered in woods with small hills. The crew wants to land, but he refuses.
He just observes from the ship.
He does. He orders them to leave the land to their larboard, their left side, and he sails back out to sea, now steering northeast, trying to find his way back.
2 days later, they see land again.
Land 2. And it's similar. Flat, covered with wood. The sailors are desperate now. They're pleading with him to land for fresh water and firewood.
And he refuses again.
He refuses again. He's fixated on the description he's heard of Greenland. He knows it's supposed to have very high ice hills. This flat, forested land just doesn't match, so he turns the prow away and sails on.
That's a remarkable level of stubbornness. He's trusting a second-hand description over the physical land right in front of him.
It really is. And after 3 more days, sailing with a southwest wind, they sight land 3.
And this one is different.
Very different. It's high, it's mountainous, and it's covered with ice hills. It appears to be an island.
Which is closer to the description of Greenland, but still not right.
Bjarni finds it little inviting. It's too harsh, too severe. So again, he refuses to land and just sails along the coast.
Finally, 4 days after that, they reach land 4.
And this time, it matches the description. They steer for the coast, and they land at a hinnis, a headland, which, by incredible coincidence, turns out to be Herjulfson, the exact spot where his father had settled.
An amazing end to a reckless journey. But the real insight comes much later, when scholars like Raffin start to map this narrative onto actual geography.
This is the pivotal part of the research. Raffin took all those details, the wind direction, the coastal descriptions, flat versus mountainous, and especially the sailing times between each sighting, and he plotted a course.
The biggest variable there must be the day's sail. How do you even estimate that?
By cross-referencing other Norse maritime records. Based on the ship designs and expected speeds, Raffin calculated that a day's sail in those conditions would cover about 27 to 30 geographical miles.
So that gives you a unit of distance.
It gives you a metric. So you have the time intervals, 2 days, then 3 days, then 4, and you have the descriptions. If you work backward from Greenland,
The picture becomes clear.
remarkably clear. Land 3, the high, mountainous, icy island, corresponds perfectly to Newfoundland.
And working back from there.
Lands 1 and 2, the lower, flat, wooded coastlines align with the coasts of Nova Scotia and probably even further south into what we now call Massachusetts or perhaps Long Island.
So the saga is essentially a verifiable map of a journey down the North American coast.
An accidental one, but yes. And it's fascinating to contrast that with Columbus's later voyage. Bjarni was sailing blind with no technology.
Whereas Columbus had the compass, he had better charts.
He had the benefit of a whole maritime revolution. He was a professional mariner with state-of-the-art technology for his time and state funding. The Norse were operating on private resources and, frankly, sheer luck.
And yet there's that tantalizing detail that Columbus himself visited Iceland in 1477.
There is. And that visit would have put him in direct contact with the society that had preserved these stories for centuries. It's entirely plausible that he gained knowledge of these Western lands from Icelandic archives or scholars.
So his famous voyage might not have been a complete leap into the unknown.
His conviction may well have been reinforced by these very sagas. But for Bjarni, despite the significance of what he'd seen, his return was met with criticism.
He was reproached for his lack of curiosity.
Exactly. The feeling in Greenland was that he should have explored these new lands. The saga says it became somewhat a matter of reproach to him, and that public criticism is what directly sparks the next intentional voyage.
Enter Leif Erikson.
Son of Erik the Red. He hears all this talk about voyages of discovery, and he decides to act. He buys Bjarni's ship, hires a crew of 35 men, including his foster father, a German man named Turker.
And he first asks his father, Erik, to lead the expedition.
He does. He recognizes Erik's experience and, well, his luck. Erik is hesitant. He says he's too old, but Leif persuades him.
But then fate intervenes,
It does. As they're riding down to the ship, Erik's horse stumbles, and he falls and injures his foot.
which he takes as an omen.
A very clear one. He declares that it was not meant for him to discover any more countries. So he returns home to Brattahlid, and Leif takes command.
And Leif's voyage is the reverse of Bjarni's. It's systematic.
Completely. He sails first to the last land Bjarni saw, the mountainous, icy island.
Land 3.
Right. They go ashore, and they see a landscape of flat, slab-like stones from the sea up to the great icebergs inland. No grass, nothing. So Leif gives it a fitting name.
Helluland. Flat stone land.
Which corresponds to Newfoundland. Leif concludes it has no good qualities, and they sail on.
Next stop is Bjarni's land 2.
2 days later, they find it. A flat, low-lying country, densely wooded with wide white sand beaches. He names it Markland, or woodland.
Nova Scotia.
Geographically, yes, a valuable source of timber, which was a resource Greenland desperately lacked.
And from there, they sail for 2 more days with a northeast wind.
Until they reach an island to the east of the mainland, they land there, and the description becomes much more sensory, more detailed.
The dew on the grass.
Exactly. They note the dew on the grass, which they taste, and they had never before tasted anything so sweet. It's very likely a reference to honeydew, a phenomenon common in that climate. Professor Raffin identified this island as what we now call Nantucket.
From there, they sail into a sound between the island and a cape on the mainland.
And here the navigation gets tricky. The saga describes extreme shallows at low tide, so shallow that their ship grounds a long way from the shore. This detail matches the hydrography of the approaches to Buzzards Bay or Mount Hope Bay perfectly.
They're so eager they don't even wait for the tide to come in.
They wade ashore to a place where a river flows out of a large lake. Once the tide rises, they sail the ship up that river and into the lake, where they decide to build their camp for the winter.
And the description of this place, which they will eventually call Vinland, is almost a paradise compared to Greenland.
It's a land of incredible abundance. The salmon in the river are bigger than any they've ever seen. The climate is so mild, they note that cattle would not require house feeding in winter. There's very little frost.
But the most compelling evidence for the location comes from an astronomical observation.
It's the detail that moves this from a good story to verifiable science. The saga notes that on the shortest day of winter, the sun was above the horizon from 7:30 in the morning until 4:30 in the afternoon.
A total of 9 hours of daylight.
A 9-hour day. And the duration of daylight on the winter solstice is a direct mathematical function of latitude. A 9-hour day occurs at a latitude of 41 degrees, 24 minutes north.
Which puts them exactly in the region of Mount Hope Bay in modern-day Rhode Island.
Precisely. The astronomy, the ecology, the nautical details, it all converges on that one specific location. It's a remarkable piece of evidence to find in a 10th century narrative.
And the land gets its famous name from a discovery made by Leif's foster father, Turker.
Right. Leif had his men exploring in parties, and one evening, Turker's group returns, but he's missing. Leif is deeply concerned and immediately organizes a search party.
But they find him nearby.
They do. He's overjoyed but disoriented. The saga describes him as a small man with a high forehead and unsteady eyes. He starts speaking in German, his native language, which the others don't understand.
A very human detail.
It is. When he finally switches back to Norse, he announces he has found vines and grapes, and he confirms it, saying he was raised in a land where grapes were plentiful.
So this immediately changes the expedition's focus.
It does. Leif sets the men to a new task. One day gathering grapes, the next day felling trees. They fill the ship's longboat with grapes and the main hold with timber. And when they sail away in the spring, Leif names the country Vinland.
Vineland.
Yes. And we know from other writers, like Adam of Bremen, that this name was known in Europe decades later. The ecology also checks out. That region of New England was and is home to abundant wild grape finds.
Leif's return journey is what earns him his nickname, Leif the Lucky.
As they're sailing home, close to Greenland, he spots something on a rock in the distance. It's a group of 15 shipwrecked Northmen.
Led by a man named Thor.
And his wife, Gudrid. Leif manages to rescue all 15 of them, plus their goods. The act makes him both wealthy and famous back in Greenland.
But the story takes a dark turn that winter.
A heady sickness strikes Thor's rescued party, and Thor himself dies, along with many of his crew. And in that same winter of 1000-1001, Erik the Red also dies.
The patriarch of the colony is gone.
He is. And with the exciting tales of Vinland spreading, the next generation is ready to make their own mark. Leif's brother, Thorvald, believes Vinland had been much too little explored.
So he borrows Leif's ship.
He does. He puts together a crew of 30 men and sets sail around AD 1002, heading directly for Leif's settlement.
Their first winter is uneventful.
Quite pleasant, actually. They spend it fishing and getting established. The following spring, Thorvald begins his explorations, taking the longboat to survey the western coast.
And what does he find?
A fair, woody land with many islands and white sands. But they find almost no sign of human habitation, just a single wooden corn shed on one island. No people, no large animals.
The next summer, 1004, he takes the main ship and explores to the east and north.
And this journey is much more eventful. A severe storm drives them onto a headland, a fennis, and the impact breaks the ship's keel,
forcing them to make major repairs.
They're stuck there for a long time. As a memorial to the event, Thorvald has them set the repaired keel up on the cape and names the place Gjallarneskeelnes.
After the repairs, they continue on.
They sail into some nearby fjords and find a beautiful wooded point of land, and Thorvald is completely captivated by it.
He says, "Here is beautiful, and here would I like to raise my dwelling."
He does. But that desire for a permanent home immediately precedes the first documented violent encounter between the Norse and the indigenous peoples of the land.
What happens?
While on that very cape, they spot 3 mounds on the beach. When they investigate, they find 3 skin boats, canoes, and under each canoe are 3 men, 9 men in total.
And the Norse reaction is immediate.
It's immediate and brutal. They attack. They kill 8 of the 9 men. 1 escapes in his boat.
A completely unprovoked attack.
As described, yes. And the consequences are swift. The saga says a strange drowsiness comes over the Norsemen and they all fall asleep. They're woken by a shout.
A warning.
A voice crying out, "Wake thou, Thorvald, and all thy companions, and leave the land without delay."
And they see an approaching force.
An innumerable crowd of skin boats pouring out of the fjord. These are the people the Norse sagas refer to as the Skraelings.
That's the term from the original history.
It is, yes. Thorvald orders his men to raise the battle screen, a defensive wall of shields, and to defend themselves but not to be aggressive. The indigenous attackers fire arrows at them for a while, and then they retreat.
But not before one of those arrows finds its mark.
Thorvald is hit. An arrow passes between his shield and the side of the ship, striking him under the arm.
A mortal wound.
He knows it immediately, and his final words are instructions for his burial.
He wants to be buried right there, on the cape he fell in love with.
He does. He says maybe his words were prophetic and he would dwell there for a time. He gives them specific instructions.
To set up crosses at his head and feet.
Yes, and to name the place Crosseness or Crossness. And this is a hugely significant detail.
Why?
Because it confirms that by AB 1004, Greenland had become Christian. Erik the Red died a pagan, but his son Thorvald, just a few years later, requests a Christian burial in this new land. It shows a massive cultural shift had already taken place.
His men follow his instructions?
They do. They bury him. They winter one last time at Leif's booths, gathering a cargo of grapes and timber, and then they sail back to Greenland the following spring.
Bringing home the great news of the discoveries, but also the tragic news of Thorvald's death and the beginning of a conflict they couldn't win.
Exactly. The expeditions were ultimately private ventures, too small and too far from home to be sustainable in the face of local resistance and logistical challenges.
Which does leave you wondering, if this had been a state-sponsored effort, with the full backing of, say, the Kingdom of Norway, instead of just a few family-led expeditions, would the history of North America have been entirely different?
It's one of history's great what-ifs. A permanent Norse presence in the 11th century would have changed everything. We're starting today, around the year AD 1005, with a voyage that's quite different from the others we've discussed.
Different in its motivation, really.
Exactly. This wasn't about discovery or settlement in the usual sense. It was a personal mission, a spiritual one.
A mission of retrieval.
Yes, to bring back a body for a proper burial.
And this is the expedition of Thorstein Erikson.
Right. He was the brother of Thorvald, who had been killed in Vinland.
So Thorstein felt this duty to go and retrieve his brother's body.
He did, and he takes the very same ship that Thorvald had sailed.
Which is an interesting detail in itself.
It is. He gets a crew of 25 men, and his wife, Gudrid, also goes with him.
And Gudrid is a name we should definitely keep in mind. She becomes, well, central to this whole narrative.
Absolutely. But this mission, for all its piety, was almost immediately a failure.
A navigational failure.
Completely. They sail out, they lose sight of land, and they are just driven across the North Atlantic for the entire summer.
They have no idea where they are.
None at all. They never even get close to Vinland.
So, after a whole summer of being lost, they finally make landfall back in Greenland.
Yes, but only after the first week of winter had officially started.
And that detail is quite specific in the records. It gives us a good sense of the timing.
It does. Using the Julian calendar, winter began around October 17th, so they're arriving in late October just as things are getting harsh.
And they land in Leifsfjord, in the western settlement.
Right, and they're in immediate need of lodging for the winter.
Which leads them to a local farmer, a man also named Thorstein.
Thorstein the Black, as he's called in the sagas.
And this is where we get a really fascinating glimpse into the spiritual climate of Greenland at the time.
It's more than just finding a place to stay. Thorstein the Black offers them hospitality, but there's this direct conversation about religion.
The host, Thorstein the Black, still followed the Old Norse faith.
He did, but he admits something quite remarkable. He says that the faith of his guests, Christianity, which was still very new in Greenland, was superior.
So even before the strange events that follow, you see this cultural shift happening, a sort of concession.
A reluctant acceptance, perhaps? But it's there.
The respite they find there is very short-lived, though.
Very. Sickness strikes Thorstein Erikson's crew.
Probably a result of the hardship of the voyage.
Almost certainly. It's described as a virulent disease, and many of the men die.
And Thorstein Erikson Even as he's falling ill himself, he starts preparing for this,
He does. He has coffins made for the bodies of his men.
and he stores them on the ship.
Yes, the plan was to wait until summer and then transport them back to Eriksfjord for a proper Christian burial.
But the sickness doesn't stay with the crew. It spreads.
It enters the host's house, and the first victim there is Grimhild, the wife of Thorstein the Black.
The account makes a point of describing her as being large and strong.
It does, which really emphasizes the severity of the plague. Not even the strongest could withstand it.
Her death is really the trigger for the more supernatural part of the story.
It is. The line between historical record and cultural belief really starts to blur here.
The sagas spend a lot of time on what happens right after she dies.
They do. It gives us this incredible insight into the Norse idea of the restless dead, the Drogar.
So Grimhild dies, but her husband hasn't returned yet. And Thorstein Erikson, lying ill, sees something happen.
He witnesses her corpse move.
It raises itself up on its elbows.
It stretches its feet out as if it's reaching for its shoes.
It's a terrifying image.
And when her husband, Thorstein the Black, finally returns and enters the room, the corpse just falls back onto the bed.
But with such force.
With such force that every beam in the house is said to have creaked, a real physical impact.
And Thorstein the Black, who is a large man himself, apparently used all of his strength just to get her body out for burial.
Which again underscores this idea of the physical weight and power of the reanimated dead.
And shortly after this, Thorstein Erikson himself dies.
He does, leaving Gudrid in this state of profound grief. Her second husband, now dead, after a failed voyage, surrounded by these unsettling events.
At this point, the host, Thorstein the Black, really steps up.
He does. He comforts Gudrid, takes her onto his knee, and makes her a promise.
He tells her he will personally see to it that her husband's body and the other Thorstein's body are taken to Eriksfjord in the spring.
And he pledges to provide her with servants for her comfort, to make sure she's taken care of.
And it's during this moment of consolation that the truly extraordinary thing happens.
Yes. The body of the deceased Thorstein Erikson sits bolt upright on the bench where it was laid.
And he calls out Gudrid's name 3 times.
A direct challenge to the laws of nature. Gudrid asks the host if she should answer him.
And the host's reaction is immediate.
No, do not answer. It's emphatic.
It's fascinating because while he accepts Christianity as superior, his immediate protocol for dealing with the speaking corpse seems rooted in the much older Norse traditions.
Absolutely. Interacting with a drogue was seen as incredibly dangerous. He understood that.
So the corpse of Thorstein Erikson then speaks directly to his namesake, the host.
Yes, and he frames the message as a final comfort for Gudrid. He says he's in a good resting place now, and he wants to tell her fortune.
And this isn't just a vague prediction. It's a detailed, structured prophecy.
It lays out the entire course of the rest of her life.
First, it foretells her next marriage, that she would marry an Icelander.
And then it focuses on their children, their descendants.
It says they would have a numerous and highly distinguished posterity.
The words are very specific. Powerful, sweet, and well-favored, a lineage with both political and personal charisma.
The prophecy also maps out her physical journeys.
Right. It says she and her new husband would move from Greenland to Norway, and then from Norway to Iceland, where they would live a long life.
And that she would outlive this husband?
Yes. And after his death, she would travel abroad all the way to Rome, a pilgrimage.
And then she would return to Iceland for her final years.
To a newly built church, where she would become a nun and eventually die.
It's an incredibly complete and accurate roadmap of a real historical figure's life.
And after delivering it, the body falls back down. It's then prepared and placed on the ship with the others.
And the events that follow show how seriously this was all taken.
Completely. In the spring of 1006, Thorstein the Black sells his farm, just as he'd need to fulfill his promise.
He sails the bodies back to Eriksfjord,
where they are finally buried by the church. Gudrid goes to live at Brattahlid under Leif's protection, and Thorstein the Black becomes a respected member of that community.
And this whole episode, a detailed prophecy delivered by a corpse, which then comes true. It's just so characteristic of the sagas.
It is. The marvelous and the supernatural are used to authenticate the historical narrative.
Now, before we move on to the next major expedition, it's worth taking a step back to understand why Vinland was such a powerful draw in the first place.
Right, and that means looking at Leif Erikson's initial voyage around the year 999 or 1000.
Because that voyage wasn't about exploration, not initially. It was a religious mission.
Exactly. It was mandated by King Olaf Tryggvason in Norway.
Leif had been in Norway, he'd become a Christian, and he was in the king's favor.
And King Olaf, who was a very zealous Christian, saw Leif as the perfect person to carry the faith to Greenland.
So he sends him back with a priest and other clergy to begin the conversion.
And it's on this return voyage that Leif has this incredible stroke of luck. Or rather, 2 strokes of luck.
Which is how he gets his name, Leif the Lucky.
Right. First, he comes across a shipwreck and rescues the crew, a great humanitarian act.
And second, on that same journey, he discovers Vinland the Good.
So he returns to Brattahlid in the autumn with the rescued sailors, the priests, and the news of this incredible new land.
But his father, Erik the Red, had a very mixed reaction to all this.
A deep contradiction is how history tells us he saw it.
He praised Leif for saving the crew of the ship.
But he was furious about the other cargo. He called the priests evil men that Leif had brought to Greenland.
A very strong resistance to the new faith.
But it didn't last. Despite his objections, Erik the Red was eventually baptized.
Following Leif's counsel.
Yes, and after that, all the people of Greenland converted. Christianity became the official religion, which really sets the cultural stage for the next, much larger expedition.
And this next expedition is the one led by Thorfinn Karlsefni, beginning in 1206.
This is really the culmination of everything that came before. It's the most ambitious settlement attempt that we see in the sagas.
And the man leading it, Thorfinn Karlsefni, was a very formidable figure.
Absolutely. The sources go to great lengths to describe his background. He was a wealthy and powerful Icelandic merchant.
And his family line, his pedigree, was just extraordinary.
It traces back to kings and high-ranking nobles from all over Danish, Swedish, Norwegian, Irish, Scottish.
And even, famously, to Ragnar Lodbrok.
Right. And his very name, Karlsefni, means destined to become a great man. So there's this sense of great expectation around him.
So in the autumn of 1006, his ship, with 40 men, arrives in Eriksfjord.
And he's not alone. There's a second ship, captained by Bjarni and Thorvald Gamlason, also with 40 men.
They're hosted at Brattahlid by Leif Erikson.
And this is where we see a bit of the economic reality of Greenland. As the Yule feast approaches, Leif becomes very somber.
He's worried.
He's worried that the feast he can provide will seem poor to these wealthy merchants from Iceland and Norway.
It's a very human detail. The pressure of hospitality, even for the leader of the settlement.
It is. But Karlsefni steps in. He offers provisions from his own ship's malt and corn to make sure the feast is a grand one.
And it is. The celebration is magnificent, far beyond what anyone expected in Greenland.
Yeah.
This generosity and good feeling leads directly to the next major event.
It does. After the Yule feast, Karlsefni proposes marriage to Gudrid.
The widow of Thorstein Erikson, whose incredible destiny we've just heard about.
Right. She accepts, and the feast is extended to celebrate their wedding.
And this union really becomes the catalyst for the Vinland expedition.
The motivation shifts. It's no longer just curiosity. It becomes a serious, planned effort at colonization, driven by the promise of Vinland's fertility and profitability.
So in 1007, they launched the expedition, and the scale is impressive.
It is. Karlsefni and Snorri fit out their ship. They're joined by Bjarni and Thorvald, and also Freydis, Erik the Red's natural daughter, and her husband.
The total number of people is given as 160 men, using the Norse long hundred system.
Which, along with the women and the livestock they brought, makes it clear this was a true colonization fleet.
Their survey of the new lands is very methodical.
Very. They sail from the western settlement past an island called Bjarni, probably modern Disco Island.
And then they sail south for 2 days.
Which brings them to their first major discovery, a land of huge flat stones.
Helluland.
Flat stone land. Many of the stones were said to be 12 ells wide, an enormous size. The only wildlife noted were foxes.
This is generally thought to be Baffin Island or northern Labrador.
That's the consensus.
Yeah.
Then they sail for 2 more days, but this time turning southeast.
And the landscape changes completely.
It becomes a heavily wooded land full of wild animals. They call it Markland.
Woodland, which corresponds well with the forested coasts of Labrador or Newfoundland.
Yes, and they find an island offshore where they kill a bear, so they name it Bear Island. Again, very direct observational naming.
From there, they sail far to the south, to a promontory, a menace.
Keelerness. They named it that because they found the keel of a ship there.
And beyond this point, they encounter these incredibly long, sandy beaches.
Furdustrands, or Wonderstrands.
And there's some debate about that name, isn't there?
There is. It might refer to the startlingly white sand, or it could be a reference to a strange optical illusion, a mirage phenomenon that made the flat land look like it was rising up.
This is likely the coast of Cape Cod, or somewhere in that region.
It seems to fit. And it's here that Karlsefni makes use of a special asset.
The two Scottish scouts.
Haki and Hekja. They had been given to Leif Erikson by King Olaf of Norway, and they were said to be faster than wild animals.
Karlsefni sends them ashore to run south and scout the land's potential.
And the description of their clothing is so specific. A light open-sided garment called a jafal, designed for speed.
They return after 3 days.
And they bring back definitive proof of the land's fertility. One has a bunch of grapes, and the other has an ear of new-sown wheat.
Which we now understand to be native maize or Indian corn.
Right. But for the Norse, it was all the confirmation they needed. Vinland was as good as the stories claimed.
So with that confirmation, they sail on, looking for a place to make their settlement.
And they find what seems like an ideal spot, a fjord or a frith with an island at its mouth that had very strong currents.
So they named the island Strami, Stream Island, and the inlet Stromfjord, Streamfrith.
The geography with those strong currents has led many to identify this area with somewhere like Buzzards Bay, with the island being Martha's Vineyard or Nantucket.
And at first it seems perfect.
It does. The island is covered in eider ducks and their nests, so many that they could barely walk without stepping on eggs.
They bring their livestock ashore, set up a camp, and the country is described as beautiful.
But they made a critical error in planning.
They hadn't provisioned enough food for the winter.
Exactly. And when the summer fishing season ended, they were suddenly facing a severe shortage, a crisis.
And this hardship is what brings the religious tensions in the group to a boil.
Yes, and it all centers on one man, Thorvald the huntsman.
He's described as a big, dark, silent man. A bit of a difficult character and pointedly a bad Christian.
Right. So after the whole community prays to the Christian god for food and nothing happens immediately, Thorvald vanishes.
They search for him for 3 days.
And they find him on a cliff, looking up at the sky, muttering to himself.
He won't say what he was doing, but shortly after he returns, a whale beaches itself.
A huge stroke of luck, or so it seems. They're starving, so they butcher it and eat it.
And they all become violently ill.
It was a species of whale they didn't recognize, likely one that was inedible.
This is when Thorvald makes his move.
He boasts very loudly that the red-bearded one, Thor, was more powerful than Christ.
He claims that the whale was a direct answer to the pagan verses he was chanting on the cliff.
A direct challenge to the new faith. But the rest of the company, now sick from the whale meat, they see it differently.
They see it as blasphemous, tainted food.
So they throw the entire rest of the carcass back into the sea and pray to God for forgiveness.
And according to the saga, their fortunes turn immediately.
The weather improves, the fishing becomes successful, and they find plenty of game. Divine favor is restored.
Amidst all this drama, during that first autumn, a very important event happens.
The birth of Snorri Karlsefni, the son of Karlsefni and Gudrid.
The first European child recorded as being born in North America.
A hugely significant historical figure who would go on to have a very important lineage in Iceland.
But the unity of the expedition doesn't last. After that first winter, the group splits.
A major disagreement about where to go next. Thorvald the huntsman wants to go north, to search for the vin in Vinland, the wine.
While Karlsefni wants to continue south, looking for more fertile land for settlement.
Thorvald leaves with just 9 men, a small, disgruntled faction.
And as he leaves, he recites these bitter, satirical verses.
Complaining that the famous Vinland had only given him water to drink, and mocking those staying behind, saying they'll just be boiling, fetid whales.
His fate is a grim one.
It is. He sails north, gets caught in a westerly gale, and is blown all the way across the Atlantic to Ireland.
Where, according to merchant reports, he and his men were captured and sold into slavery. So Karlsefni, with the main body of the expedition, head south.
Yes, and they find a place that is even more promising than Stromfjord.
They reach a river that flows through a lake into the sea, but the entrance is shallow, only passable at high tide.
They name this place Hop, which means a small inlet or bay. The geography is a very close match for Mount Hope Bay in modern Rhode Island.
And the land there is everything they could have hoped for.
It's incredible. Fields of self-sown wheat sow, maize on the low ground, and grapevines on the high ground.
The streams are full of fish.
And when the tide goes out, they find halibut trapped in the pools. An amazing abundance of food.
They stay there for about half a month, And it's here that they have their first contact with the native inhabitants.
One morning, they just see a large number of canoes coming towards them,
The people in them are swinging poles in a particular direction with the sun.
which Snorri Thorbrandsson interprets as a sign of peace.
So the Norse hold up a white shield, their own signal for non-aggression.
The people who arrive are described as the Skrælings. The description is quite specific. Dark-skinned, coarse hair, large eyes, broad cheeks.
They look at the Norsemen with curiosity and then paddle away south.
So the Norsemen decide to build more permanent houses there, and the winter they spend at Hop is incredibly mild.
No snow. The cattle can graze outside all winter.
A massive advantage, and in the spring, the Skrælings return.
But this time, in unbelievable numbers.
The saga says the sea looked as if it were sown with coal.
And this time, they swing their poles from the sun, which the Norse take as a more aggressive sign.
So Karlsefni raises a red shield.
But what follows isn't a battle, it's trade.
Yes, the Skrælings are intensely interested in one thing: red cloth.
They offer furs in exchange, but Karlsefni is smart enough to forbid the trading of weapons.
A crucial strategic decision. And the trade itself is fascinating.
At first, they trade a full fur pelt for a span-long piece of cloth.
But as the cloth runs low, the Norse start cutting it into smaller and smaller strips.
And the Skrælings still pay the same price, or even more.
It shows the value is in the novelty and the color, not the quantity.
And then there's the final brilliant twist.
When the cloth is all gone, the Norse women start offering them milk porridge.
And the Skrælings are just as eager to trade their furs for that.
And because they eat it on the spot, Karlsefni gets to keep the furs without losing any more valuable goods. It's a masterstroke of trade strategy.
This period of peaceful trade, however, is shattered by something completely unexpected.
A bull. One of Karlsefni's bulls gets out of the woods and starts to roar.
The sound the native people had never heard before.
And it terrifies them. They flee, and they don't come back for 3 weeks.
When they do return, it's not for trade.
They return in force, described as a rushing torrent. The Norse raise the red shield. It's conflict.
The Skrælings attack with slings.
And they have this one terrifying, strange weapon.
A large blue ball, like a sheep's stomach, which they swing from a pole and launch at the Norsemen.
The sound it made when it hit the ground caused absolute panic.
The Norsemen break and run. Their morale is shattered.
They fall back to some rocks by the river to try and make a stand.
And this is where Freydis, Erik's daughter, has her moment.
She's pregnant and she's furious at the men for running. She shouts at them, saying she could fight better than they are.
She finds the body of a fallen Norseman, Thorbrand Snorreson.
And she picks up his sword. As the Skrælings close in on her, she does something extraordinary.
She pulls out her breast from her clothing and slaps it with the flat of the naked sword.
This act of defiance, this shocking display, it just terrifies the attackers.
They stop in their tracks and flee back to their canoes.
Her bravery saved the day. But the Norse had lost 2 men.
And they were so shaken by the sheer number of attackers that they wondered if they had been fighting real people or some kind of optical illusion, Sjónarfinger.
It speaks to the psychological shock of the encounter.
And there's that one final story from the battle about the axe.
Right. A Skræling finds a discarded Norse axe. He tries it on wood and it works.
But then he hits a stone with it, and the blade breaks.
And because it couldn't cut stone, he decides it's useless and throws it away. A perfect illustration of the clash of material cultures.
After this battle, Karlsefni makes a decision.
He decides that despite how good the land is, they will always be under threat from the native population.
So a permanent settlement is just not viable.
They resolve to leave Hop and return to Greenland.
On their way north, there's another stranger encounter.
The Uniped. They see a glistening speck on the shore, which turns out to be a one-legged man.
An Einfetting.
And this creature shoots an arrow that hits and mortally wounds Thorvald Erikson. A different Thorvald, it should be noted.
And his dying words are very telling.
To a fruitful land have we come, but hardly shall we enjoy any benefit from it. A perfect summary of the entire Vinland experience.
So after 3 years in the New World, they prepare to head home.
On the voyage back, near Markland, they capture 2 young Skræling boys.
Who become an invaluable source of intelligence.
They're taught the Norse language, they're baptized, and they tell the Norse about their land.
They say their people are ruled by 2 kings and live in caves or holes in the ground.
And most intriguingly, they describe another land, opposite their own, where people wear white clothes, carry poles with flags, and shout loudly.
which the Norse interpret as being white man's land or Great Ireland.
A tantalizing hint of other Europeans, perhaps Irish monks, being in the Americas even before them?
But the voyage home has one last tragedy.
Yes, the ship of Bjarni Grimolfsson. It's driven into what's called a worm sea.
Infested with shipworms that eat through the hull, the ship starts sinking fast.
They have one small boat, which can only hold half the men. Bjarni proposes they draw lots.
A democratic solution, not based on rank.
Bjarni's lot is drawn to go in the boat, but then an Icelander who had sailed with him speaks up.
He reminds Bjarni of a promise they made to share the same fate.
And Bjarni, in an incredible act of honor, gives up his spot. He gets back on the sinking ship and lets the Icelander take his place in the boat.
But Bjarni and the men with him are lost.
The survivors in the small boat eventually made it to Dublin.
So in the summer of 1011, Karlsefni and Gudrid finally return to Iceland.
They settle at a farm called Reynisnes. There's a small note that Karlsefni's mother didn't approve of Gudrid at first.
She thought her a poor match.
But once she got to know her and saw what a distinguished woman she was, she welcomed her.
And the sagas conclude by stressing the importance of the lineage that came from this union.
From Snorri, the child born in Vinland, and Gudrid.
It's a line that includes several important bishops in Iceland.
Thorvald Runelsson, Bjorn, Brand I,
And perhaps most significantly, Haraldur Erlingsson.
who was the lawman of Iceland and one of the compilers of the Landnámabók, the Book of Settlements.
He was a direct ninth-generation descendant of Snorri Karlsefnisson.
So the people writing and preserving Iceland's history were descended from the first European child born in the New World.
It shows that these Vinland voyages weren't just some forgotten footnote.
Not at all. They were woven directly into the foundational memory and identity of Iceland itself.
The level of detail in these accounts, the geography, the trade, the cultural clashes, the personal acts of heroism and sacrifice, it's all there.
It's a rich and complex record of ambition, discovery, and ultimately a failed colonization attempt, where the greatest obstacle wasn't the ocean or the climate, but the inevitable conflict with the people already there. Today we're looking at a really critical moment that follows the initial Norse explorations of Vinland. We're focusing on the voyages that began around 80, 10, 11.
And this is really a turning point, isn't it? The shift from pure discovery to something more like organized business.
Exactly. It's a move toward commercial enterprise. And that shift, as we'll see, brings with it incredible opportunity, but also profound conflict.
The person who really sets the stage for all of this is Thorfinn Karlsefni. His return in 1010 changes everything.
It does. His expedition, even if it wasn't a total success in terms of settlement, it provided the proof of concept. It changed the entire perception of Vinland back in Greenland.
History tells us these expeditions were suddenly seen as profitable and honorable. So they went from being these incredibly dangerous, almost mythical journeys
to justifiable commercial ventures. And that's the key motivation for what happens next. It's all about the potential for profit.
And profit attracts new players.
Yes, it does. That validation brings in new people who weren't part of that original tight-knit Greenland group. The research introduces us to Helgi and Finnbogi.
Two Icelandic brothers.
That's right, from Osfjord. Their ship comes into Greenland from Norway the very same summer Karlsefni gets back. So the timing is perfect. They overwinter there, placing themselves in an ideal position to get in on the action.
And this is where Freydis Eriksdottir enters the picture.
Erik the Red's daughter. She sees the opportunity immediately. She sees the brothers, their ship, their resources, and their expertise.
So she makes the first move.
She does. She seeks them out at their winter quarters in Greenland and proposes what seems, on the surface at least, like a very straightforward partnership.
A joint venture.
A simple, attractive proposal. They'll sail to Vinland together, harvest its resources. We're talking timber, furs, all of it, and then split all the profits 50-50.
For the brothers, this must have seemed like a golden opportunity.
Of course. Partnering with the daughter of the settlement's founder, someone with direct access to all the existing knowledge and routes, it significantly lowered their risk. So they agreed.
But Freydis needed something more than just partners. She needed infrastructure. She needed a base.
Which is why she goes to her brother, Leif. Leif the Lucky. He's the one who built the original houses, the first camp in Vinland. She asks if she can use them.
And this request seems simple enough, but it becomes the legal sticking point for this whole tragic affair.
It's the central legal detail. Leif's response is consistent and very, very firm. He absolutely refuses to give her the buildings.
They'll only lend them.
He will only lend them. And in Norse legal tradition, that's a world of difference. It means Freydis gets temporary use, temporary stewardship, but not ownership, not control.
So Leif is protecting his own claim. By lending the houses, he's maintaining ultimate authority over that site. Freydis is just a tenant.
A temporary tenant with a conditional claim. It's a subtle point, but it's the ambiguity she's going to exploit.
The contract they draw up for the voyage itself seems meticulous, though. It reflects a certain amount of caution between the parties.
It does. The terms were specific. Each ship, Freydis's and the brothers, was to have exactly 30 fighting men, in addition to any women who were accompanying them for other tasks.
30 men each.
Yeah.
So it's a treaty between equals. It's designed to make sure neither side can just overpower the other.
A balance of power. But Freydis violates that principle before they even leave the harbor.
She brings extra men?
Secretly. She takes on 5 additional men, bringing her force up to 35.
And the brothers don't know about this.
They remain completely unaware until they arrive in Vinland. It gives her a 10% advantage in manpower. It's clear premeditation.
It suggests she was already planning for a confrontation.
She was willing to undermine the entire agreement from the start just to ensure she had superior force if or when a dispute arose.
So the two ships set out, they try to stay together, but there's a slight difference in their arrival time.
A minor thing, but it has major consequences. The brother ship arrives just somewhat before Freydis's, and that small head start leads directly to the first conflict.
Because they get there first, they assume the agreement for a joint venture includes joint use of the facilities.
It's a logical assumption. They unload their gear and move it into Leif's buildings, believing they have equal right to the shelter that Leif had lent for the expedition.
And then Freydis arrives.
Her reaction is immediate, and it's objective. She confronts them, and her first words are, "Why bring ye in your things here?" It's not a question, it's a challenge.
So much for the partnership.
It collapses in that instant. She then uses that ambiguity in Leif's agreement. She insists that Leif lent the houses to her, and to her alone.
Which effectively denies the brothers access to the only established shelter right as winter is approaching.
It puts them in an impossible position. They can either fight the daughter of Erik the Red on the spot, or they can concede.
And their response is, well, it's quite telling.
It is. Helgi is the one who speaks. He essentially concedes, but with a statement that has really echoed through the sagas. "In malice are we brothers easily excelled by thee."
He's acknowledging that they're being outplayed not by law or by strength, but by pure wickedness.
Exactly. They recognize what she is, and they choose to de-escalate. They choose not to meet her malice with violence, at least not yet.
So they have to move all of their supplies out of the buildings.
Well, a huge, arduous task. And they're forced to build a completely new settlement from scratch right when they should be preparing for winter.
They pick a spot further from the shore, near a lake.
And the research notes that they put their new camp in good order. It suggests they were disciplined, maybe even implicitly fortifying their position. They knew they were in a tense situation.
Meanwhile, Freydis, having secured the best shelter, gets right back to business.
The main business, for her. She puts her crew, including her 5 extra men, to work cutting timber for her ship's cargo. Her motivation was always mercenary. She sabotaged her partners to get a monopoly.
As the winter sets in, there's a brief attempt to smooth things over.
The brothers make an overture. They invite Freydis and her people to socialize, to play sports, to hold amusements. It was a classic Norse way of trying to maintain social cohesion in a very isolated, stressful environment.
And at first, it works.
For a short time, yes. Both camps participate. A fragile truce seems to hold.
But it doesn't last.
Not at all. The accounts are very clear that evil reports and discord sprung up amongst them, and the games stop immediately.
We don't know what these evil reports were specifically.
No, the text doesn't elaborate. But whatever they were toxic enough to completely sever all contact. For the rest of that long winter, no one passed between the two settlements.
So they're living in close proximity, but in total silence and hostility.
Which is a psychologically potent situation. That festering paranoia and resentment is the perfect backdrop for what Freydis does next. It allows her to frame her actions as a response to some long-standing provocation.
The final act of treachery begins early one morning. The source material is full of these vivid, almost cinematic details.
It is. Freydis gets up before dawn. The ground is wet with dew. She puts on her husband Thorvald's cloak, but tellingly, doesn't bother with shoes or stockings.
It suggests she's in a hurry, that this is a planned, stealthy operation.
Absolutely. She goes straight to the brother's house. A man had just left, leaving the door slightly ajar. She slips inside, or rather, stands in the doorway, silently.
Just observing.
Observing, calculating. Finnbogi is awake and sees her. He asks why she's there.
And she asks him to come outside.
To isolate him. She gets him away from his brother, away from his men. They sit down by a tree, and she begins this masterclass in deception.
Finnbogi seems to be acting in good faith. He's direct with her.
He is. He says he's happy with the land, with its potential, but he's genuinely distressed by this quarrel that's ruining everything for no good reason. He sees it as needless.
And Freydis pretends to agree with him.
Completely. She feigns sympathy, and then she presents her fabricated solution. She claims she wants to leave to end the conflict. To do that, she wants to buy the brother's ship, which is larger than hers.
A simple business transaction to resolve the entire dispute.
And Finnbogi, who must have been desperate for any peaceful way out of this, readily agrees. He thinks he's just negotiated a clean break that benefits everyone. He's been completely disarmed.
With that groundwork laid, Freydis returns to her own house.
Her next target is her husband, Thorvald.
She gets into bed, deliberately waking him with her cold, wet feet. And when he asks why she's wet and cold,
she unleashes the lie, a furious, fabricated story. She claims she went to buy the ship, but the brothers attacked her, that they beat her and used her shamefully.
She knows exactly which buttons to push. It's an attack on his honor.
A devastating one. She calls him a miserable man for failing to avenge her, and by extension, himself. Then she gives him the ultimatum.
Avenge me, or I will separate from you.
And in that society, a woman of her standing initiating a divorce would mean total ruin for him. Financially, socially, everything. His reputation, especially being married to Erik the Red's daughter, would be destroyed.
And he can't withstand that pressure.
He breaks completely. He doesn't question her, doesn't investigate. He just orders his men to arm themselves. Her personal vendetta has now become a military operation, sanctioned under the false pretense of avenging her honor.
The attack is a surprise.
Swift and brutal. They storm the brothers' house while the men are sleeping. They bind them, and then they lead them out one by one.
And Freydis is there, watching.
Supervising. As each man is brought out, she gives the order, and he is killed. She is directing the systematic execution of every single man in that crew.
She's eliminating all rivals, all witnesses, securing the entire prize for herself.
But then something happens. When only the women are left, Thorvald's men stop.
They refuse to kill them.
The research is specific. None of the men would kill the 5 remaining women. There was a line, a moral or social taboo that even they wouldn't cross.
But Freydis had no such line.
None at all. Faced with this refusal from her own men, she doesn't hesitate. She grabs an axe herself, and she personally kills all 5 women. She doesn't stop until the last one is dead.
After this evil work, as the saga calls it, her focus shifts immediately to the cover-up.
Yes, she acts as if it was all a necessary, if unpleasant, business. Her next moves are all about controlling the narrative and securing her profits.
She threatens her own crew into silence.
With death. I will take the life of that man who tells of this business. It's a simple, effective threat. Their survival is now tied directly to their silence.
And she provides them with the official story.
A simple, plausible lie. They are to say that Helgi, Finnbogi, and their crew simply chose to remain behind in Vinland. Perhaps they decided to stay, perhaps they got lost. Anything but the truth.
So, come spring, they prepare for the voyage home.
They prepare the brothers' ship, the larger one she pretended to buy, and load it, and her own, with everything of value, all the timber they cut, and of course all the possessions of the crew they just murdered.
She got what she wanted.
In material terms, yes. The voyage back is quick, uneventful. They arrive in Eriksfjord early that summer. She goes back to her home and immediately starts paying off her crew.
With gifts to ensure their loyalty.
Portions of the stolen cargo, most likely. It's a bribe, but it also makes them complicit. They're now stakeholders in the lie.
But it's not enough. The story gets out.
The combination of threats and bribes isn't foolproof. The saga says some were not so mindful of their promises. The story of what really happened begins to circulate, and it eventually reaches her brother, Leif.
And Leif doesn't believe the official story.
Not for a second. Given his sister's character, he immediately suspects the worst. He thinks very ill of the business, and he launches his own investigation.
An investigation that is not gentle.
No. He bypasses any formal legal process. He takes 3 of Freydis's men and tortures them
Until they confess.
until they all confess to the exact same story. Their accounts are consistent, confirming every detail of the treachery and the massacre. Her guilt is proven beyond any doubt.
Which puts Leif in an impossible situation.
Absolutely. The crime is mass murder for profit. The penalty should be execution. But he can't bring himself to execute his own sister. He says he will not do to her what she deserves.
So instead of a legal punishment, he gives her a social one. A curse.
A powerful and, as it turns out, effective one. He makes a public pronouncement, a prediction. Thy posterity will never thrive. He's damning her entire family line.
And it works. The community turns on her.
Completely. From that moment on, no one holds Freydis or her family in anything but ill regard. They become social outcasts. Her expedition, which brought back so much material wealth, ends in total social and moral ruin.
Now, at the very same time all this is unfolding, we have the complete opposite story playing out with Thorfinn Karlsefni.
It's a perfect counter-narrative. He leaves Eriksfjord around the same time Freydis gets back, and his ship is described as the richest ever to leave Greenland, filled with the legitimate profits of his voyage.
And his journey is a success from start to finish.
It is. He sails to Norway, winters there, sells his goods, and is held in high honor. He proves that Vinland can be profitable through legitimate, honorable enterprise.
And it's in Norway that this really interesting little transaction takes place.
A fascinating detail. As he's preparing to sail for Iceland, a German trader from Bremen approaches him. He wants to buy one specific item from Karlsefni's ship.
The husisnatu.
The husisnotu. The literal translation is something like house ornament, but the price tells the real story. The German offers half a mark of gold for it.
Which was an enormous sum of money.
A fortune. About 16 pounds sterling at the time. It suggests this wasn't just some trinket. It was likely a beautifully carved house vane or a decorative beam, something of immense value.
And Karlsefni agrees to the sale.
He does. And what's crucial is that Karlsefni himself doesn't know what kind of wood it is, but the German buyer does.
It's Missouri wood from Vinland.
Exactly. We now identify it as a type of high-quality maple like bird's eye or curled maple. It was prized for its beautiful grain. And this single sale proves that Vinland's resources were desirable to traders deep inside continental Europe.
It's really the first documented trade of a New World commodity in Europe.
It is. And after that profitable exchange, Karlsefni sails on to Iceland, buys land at Glomber, and settles down. He becomes a respected man, and his story is one of lasting success.
And the Sagas put a huge emphasis on his legacy, on his family line with his wife Gudrid.
Their story is presented as the model of how to do it right. They establish a numerous and distinguished race. Their honor translates directly into generational success.
Gudrid herself is a remarkable figure. After Karlsefni's death, she runs the estate with their son Snorri.
The first child of European heritage born in Vinland.
And later in life, she becomes deeply pious. She goes on a pilgrimage south, a major undertaking, and when she returns, her son Snorri has built a church on their land.
She lives out her days as a nun, a recluse. It completes the family's narrative arc, from explorers to successful landowners to figures of deep spiritual commitment. It's the polar opposite of Freydis's legacy of shame.
The text then meticulously traces their descendants.
It does, and it's important why. Snorri's son, Thorgeir, was the grandfather of Bishop Brand. Snorri's daughter, Hallfrid, was the grandmother of Bishop Thorlak. Another of Karlsefni's sons, Bjorn, was the grandfather of Bishop Bjorn.
So their line is full of powerful church leaders.
Which underscores their immense and lasting prestige. But it also hints at how these stories were preserved. Karlsefni was the one who related all these events. It's highly probable that one of his own descendants, Bishop Thorlak, who was a major legal and ecclesiastical figure in the 12th century, was the one who first compiled these accounts.
Which gives this material incredible historical weight. It's very close to the source.
Very close. Now, if we shift from the narrative to the more academic context, there are these ancient Icelandic manuscripts that try to place Vinland in the wider world.
Like the fragment of Vellum Codex, number 192.
Right. From the late 14th century, it gives us a sense of the Norse mental map of the world.
It lays out a sequence of lands, starting from their heartland and moving outwards.
It starts with Denmark, goes through Sweden, and then further north, past Bjarmaland, which they saw as the edge of the inhabited world. From there, it says, uninhabited lands stretch north until you reach Greenland.
It really emphasizes how isolated Greenland was.
It does. And then the Codex describes the new lands south of Greenland in the sequence we know: Helluland, then Markland, and from there it says it's a short distance to Vinland the Good.
But then it includes this very strange, speculative idea.
It's fascinating. The fragment adds a note that some think Vinland goes out from Africa.
So they thought the new landmass might be connected to a known continent far to the south.
It seems some of their geographers entertained that possibility. They even reasoned that if that were true, there must be a sea running between Vinland and Markland, which shows they were trying to reconcile their discoveries with their existing classical knowledge of the world.
The codex comes back to Karlsefni at the end.
It does. It confirms he was the one who cut the famous Husus Notre, but it also adds a kind of qualifier. It says that while he sought out Vinland, he didn't fully affect the knowledge of it or gain its true riches.
It gives the ultimate credit back to Leif.
It positions Leif the Lucky as the true foundational discoverer. Even as Karlsefni is celebrated as the successful settler, Leif remains the intellectual authority on Vinland.
The contrast that the saga material presents is just so stark. You have Karlsefni's success, this honorable legacy, the proven value of this new land, and right alongside it, you have the complete moral and social collapse brought on by Freydis's greed.
The writers make a point of documenting her specific atrocities, like the killing of the women, an act that guarantees her infamy right next to the genealogy of Karlsefni's descendants who became bishops. It's a deliberate juxtaposition. It serves as this powerful, embedded ethical lesson about what it takes morally to succeed in a new world.
Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed learning something new. That's all for now, but in case you didn't notice, there are a lot more episodes on this subject available on this channel. If you're enjoying these historical podcasts, please like and subscribe and share with other history buffs.
While this is an AI recording, the research that has gone into this production is comprehensive and focuses on very specific moments in history, designed to bring as much detail to the listener as possible. Thanks again for listening in.